Hey, welcome to Political Trade Secrets. Really appreciate everybody being with us. I'm Sean Bartley, and co-host is Dustin Olson. And today we're going to be talking about what it takes to be a great campaign manager, and really looking forward to that conversation. And I believe Dustin's going to be joining us in just a moment here. So, um, we're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be talking about a little bit about the big game that happened yesterday, um, and a bunch of other stuff that's going on in politics in the world. So we're going to be having that conversation here with you today. Um, and before we get started, looking forward to talking about how this show is possible. And so, how do we do that? It's with the help of some great sponsors, and our sponsors are. Um, well, and thank you for the welcome backs. Glad to be back this morning with you. Sorry I couldn't be with you more last week. So, and as I was saying, we have some great sponsors. Look, if you're thinking about running for office, or you're considering how you can be the best political leader in your neck of the woods, well, reach out to us at Olson Strategies. It's OLSON strategies.com. We would love to have a conversation with you about what it takes to be the best, the political leader your community, state, and country needs. You can email me at Sean, SEAN, at olsonstrategies.com, or Dustin at olsonstrategies.com, and we'll have that conversation with you today. Um, we're also proud to be sponsored by Grassfire. It's www.grassfire.us. What do? It's all of the one-on-one, human-to-human interactions that campaigns have. So it's canvassing, petitioning, live calling. It's on your doorstep, in front of the grocery store, or over the phone. Reach out to Grassfire. It's www.grassfire.us, and make sure that the interactions that your campaign's having, that that you that are being delivered, not just well, but on a scale that can make a difference for your campaign or your issue in the days, weeks, and months ahead. And then the we're also they fuel 10centtexting.com. What does 10cent texting do? It's really all of the it's the way to connect with folks where they are on their mobile device. So the right here it is, 82% of people open every text message they get. What does that mean? It means you need to be able to actually get their attention and keep it. And that's what 10 Cent Texting does better than anybody. They literally wrote the book on political texting. So go to 10centtexting.com to learn more about how you can use them in your campaigns, or to reach out to constituents and voters in your neck of the woods. And we're getting some great feedback. Alexandria let us know. Look, for young conservatives is right. If you're looking for experience helping great candidates and causes, you can reach out to us about interning with Olson Strategies. So we would love to have a conversation with you about that. Again, you can email me at Sean, SEAN, at olsonstrategies.com, or Dustin at olsonstrategies.com, and really have a good conversation about what it takes, not just to, if you're thinking about running for office, but if you want to work with candidates and make a difference. We have a great internship and fellowship program that we'd love to talk to you about, and we're starting back up again for this year. And so I hope everybody had a great weekend. Here we are, it's Monday morning, and I don't know about some of you, but watched the game yesterday. Actually, got a question about the fellowship. So this is really for folks that that might be a little later on in life have maybe done some things professionally and would like to see how they can make a difference with candidates and campaigns. And so the way the fellowship program works is really using some of those skills that you've already accomplished in other areas of life, and really applying them to helping great candidates all over the country that we have that we're blessed to talk with every day. So, well, anyway, as I was saying, I hope everybody had a great weekend. Um, uh, had a busy weekend on our end here, and it looks like Dustin's joining us here. And the uh, I had the honor locally to um, lead a free speech rally and march yesterday or on Saturday, and so really appreciated the opportunity to reach out to folks. And what we talked about, what was important, was really the ability to have your voice be heard wherever you are. And regardless of of your point of view, you have a right to be able to speak freely. That's one of the great things about our Constitution. So I'd love to hear from some of you about what you're seeing out there, um, and if you see as I do that really the right to free speech and assembly are have been curtailed a great deal in the last year. And so the so just kind of looking at what that was, one of the things I spoke about was what it takes, to really fight back against some of these things that we've been seeing, and just to point it out, like, hey, we've seen the practices of shadow banning and of really seeing that voices be curtailed. Dustin and I, we've talked about, in our businesses, um, uh, the in our businesses, we've seen that the practices um, the practices have really been um, uh, shut down from being able to advertise standpoint and stuff like that. And so it looks like we're having some technical difficulties here. Uh, that's why I've been leading off this morning. And so we're gonna have to come back on. So really appreciate everybody being on so far. Dustin's going to be able to do that from Control Central, and so we really appreciate everybody joining so far. And when we come back, we had a couple of questions here that we're gonna answer. And jump right in. So we'll be back here in just a few minutes. Oh, and but in the meantime, we had a question about how to apply for the internship or scholarship programs. Great question. Go ahead and email. You can email me at Sean, SEAN, at olsonstrategies.com, or Dustin at olsonstrategies.com. And that's a great way to do that. And hey, we were just talking about a lot of stuff.
Well, I enjoyed that. It's fun to watch you sweat. So anyway, this is the great thing. Live streaming has become more and more of a thing across the internet, and the great thing about that is they keep updating the technology. And of course, the internet in the last few weeks has been, well, under siege. I heard you talking about shadow banning and everything else. We're definitely in a very important moment in our country's history where your ability to speak is being affected. I don't know that today is that, but anyway, I encourage us to just keep going and roll with the punches, because that's what a Tom Brady would do.
Yeah.
And I heard you mention the Super Bowl, which we're going to mention because it's a great, that's a great metaphor and or also a lesson for those who might be the quarterback for their campaign, which is the campaign manager, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
You were saying about the fellowship and the internship.
Yeah. So, hey, this really is a great opportunity to join us. And you're going to get to learn a lot of different things, probably some technology. I would.
That would be good.
But yeah, it really is a great opportunity. The fellowship program, it's an opportunity to use some of the skills you've already gotten in different areas of the world, and business or whatever you've been in. And to really apply that to politics. And, in our internship program, it really is a great way to develop skills, and we get you on the court, and really making a difference and actually getting to work with clients and doing some other things that make a difference. So those opportunities are there for you. And so we'd love to have that conversation with you. You can do that simply by emailing us. So,
yep.
So we'd love to hear from you there. You mentioned the Super Bowl. I was just thinking about this. They had a statistic up yesterday that the Buccaneers started 7-5 this season before finishing the season 8-0, including the playoffs. And so it is something to be said for, people saying, hey, you're down for the count, or there's really no chance. So to really look at, no kidding, here is the what it takes for execution, what it takes for leadership,
and performance.
Absolutely. And Tom Brady was a great example of that. Really, no kidding. There's still an opportunity for that the whole way around. So
yeah, so it's really great. So I think one of our audience members has signed up for a special kind of training that you and I have done here in the leadership program. But I remember going to one of the trainings a few years ago that I believe my wife was actually in, and one of the coaches, he actually had been part of coaching Tom Brady and using some of the distinctions, some of the things that we talk about here. And at that time, Tom Brady had just won. I don't know if it's his 2 Super Bowl wins ago or if it was 1 ago. I can't remember. I can't keep track of all of them. But he talks about, that was the Super Bowl where Tom Brady was down by the largest number, the Patriots down by the largest spread ever for a team to come back and win. And one of the things that we've talked about, and I saw there's a couple things I noticed yesterday that are applicable to if you're a campaign manager or if you are any kind of campaign leader, even the candidate yourself. First thing is that the only moment in time that actually exists is right now. Like this moment right now is the only time that actually exists. Time is kind of a human construct, but we oftentimes have our past and our future, and we're living into that past. And that's how we hold our past, not in that it's in the present, but that we actually have it in the future, and that we're actually living into that past in the future. Well, that's not how Tom Brady approaches his games. He approaches it as right now and the possibility of winning. Like he plays into the possibility of winning, and it doesn't matter what's happened the first 3 quarters. Now, you just described the season for the Buccaneers. That's a perfect example of what they did in the whole season. The second thing I saw with Tom Brady, and you see it in most of the games, he might get upset occasionally, but he pretty much is a cool cucumber when it comes to being in the middle of a game, whether it's that game a few years ago where they were in a huge deficit. It wasn't quite as bad of a deficit as the Kansas City Chiefs were in, but pretty close. They were pretty close to that far behind. And it's pretty remarkable to think that he stays calm. And when it comes to being a campaign manager, I had a candidate many years ago. He had been an Army colonel. The guy turned out to be a terrible candidate and a horrible person. So for many reasons I can't talk about publicly. But anyway, he turned out to be a terrible person. However, he gave me a really great piece of advice. He said, you have to have ice in your veins. When everybody else is freaking out around you, you had to have ice in your veins. Now, he wasn't the kind of person who was that way, but that piece of wisdom 20 years ago was really valuable for me, that when everything's going crazy around you in the middle of it, because you're going to go through a storm, no matter what, when you run for office, and having somebody who's at the tiller who has a calm head is really going to make a difference.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's critical. It really takes on that persona too. Like if you're that way as a campaign manager, or in this case as a quarterback or whatever, it really lends itself well to not only that being the way you act and interact, but really your whole campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a comment from Pat. It said people in our district are still conservatives, but the execution towards the election lacks. And
Yeah.
and I think that's another thing that is also critical here when we're talking about being an effective campaign manager, is really execution. So we talked about this last week in the world of performance. A few times talked about the three laws of performance on Thursday. A few weeks ago we talked about really the whole world of performance, and actually it really coming down to the actions that are done and the things that are happening out there.
Yeah, the only thing that ever impacts reality is action. Now, action can actually take the form of speaking in language.
Yep.
We've talked about declarations and things like that. It's these actually impact reality, and they are a form of action as well. But we're not talking about idle chatter, but we're talking about language that creates. But action is the only thing that impacts reality, and this is the domain, this is the purpose, this is where the campaign manager needs to be focused, is how do you get performance every single day, how do you get forward moving action. And I would say that's the most important thing. As general consultants, it's something that we do, is we create a system. We have what we call our campaign performance system. We actually have designed a system for our campaign where all the people involved, it's all oriented towards daily action and weekly action. We actually score the campaign. We have a performance score, weekly performance score. We actually score the campaign on its amount of action, its amount of execution, as Pat was saying. And that is critical. And any campaign that uses our campaign performance system, and even if they don't have all the parts that you would need for a really amazing campaign, they always perform at a higher level than they would otherwise, because of what Pat said. There's some execution there, and you're executing at a higher level than you would have otherwise. I'd like to take a moment just to let people know, if you would like to make sure, because there's going to be times where all the internet and the technology and everything else just hits the fritz, and we want to make sure that we're able to stay in communication with each other, and that we're able to have this movement to reignite American patriotism, to empower citizens to be the political leaders that their communities need. I encourage people to go to politicaltradesecrets.com. You can sign up to be a Political Trade Secrets insider, get exclusive stuff, but also make sure that we can communicate no matter what. It's amazing. Over the weekend, even more, I saw Wayne Allen Root was without any notice was kicked off of Twitter. He's a pretty, he's conservative, but he's nothing like crazy. He's a New York Post columnist. Pretty remarkable to see that kind of stuff just keeps happening. It's constantly there. So we who knows. We have an episode this week where we're going to talk about the Times article, which is crazy, which I mentioned on Friday that people should take a look at it. It is a bizarre world article. We're going to have fun talking about that. Sean, preview some of your thoughts about it, because this is the article. It's so remarkable. The secret history of the shadow campaign that saved the 2020 election. We know some of the people who were involved with this, people that I wouldn't trust with my life, but
two things that struck me. First, I was shocked that Time magazine still existed.
Yes.
So
Well, you can see I had to print it off because I don't think you can buy it in the store.
so that threw me for a loop right away. But
Mhm.
after I got over that, um, it's really that this talks about this being, I think the title says something about a bipartisan effort.
Mhm.
There was nothing bipartisan about it, and actually, it gives itself away in the article, which
Mhm.
really, uh, um, I was like, oh, okay, so that's how bipartisan people act at certain times. Got it.
Yeah.
You know,
It is actually, and we'll talk about this more later this week when we talk about it. There's this book called The Victory Lab. It's a really good book people should read, but it's a lot of the usual suspects that they talk about in there. What's his name? Porterez. I never know how to say his name. Anyway, he's this big union strategist, and he's kind of the impetus of the whole thing. And it's all of your typical liberal groups. And then they basically get a bunch of billionaires to go in and act just like Soros, and start these groups up. It's a bunch of what you and I call rigging. They're now calling fortifying. So that's going to be the
well,
episode. Fortifying's the new rigging.
and it is. And what I also was impressed with was, we talked about this in October. We were not on any of the Zooms. I want to be very clear about
Hmm.
that. Yet, it's as though we could have written parts of this article.
Yeah.
Um, so those were things I was struck with, um, and when you were talking about signing up for political trade secrets and really being able to empower and the empowerment, um, I really think that is something that is not really talked about for campaign managers in particular,
Hmm.
which is really a skill set that you need to be successful.
Yeah.
Um, it's empowering the candidate to be able to do the things that only candidates can do, or that candidates are certainly most effective at. Um, and then it's also being able to manage. There's going to be a lot of different personalities around,
Mhm.
and really being able to make sure that everybody gets heard in a way that they feel like they're being able to do what it is they want to do. Everybody wants the candidate to be successful, um, but
Yeah,
really,
that's the challenge of the campaign manager. You're really getting to the core of it, is that you're the one who's talking to most people on the campaign. You might have campaign staff that are going to be dealing with certain people a little bit more, but ultimately the campaign manager is the one who has to say no more than anybody else. And at some point, saying no to people, they don't like it. That's just something that goes with being a human being. People don't like it, but at the same time, you have to keep everybody focused. How do you keep people who have 1,000 different great ideas? The perfect idea that's going to win the election, and you have all these people coming to you and they say, "Oh, we should, do tea parties around the district where we have people play, games and everything, and that's what we're going to do to win." And you're like, "Okay." Maybe that's the thing, but then you have someone else who comes with, like we should have, who knows, we need to do billboards.
yeah,
That's going to be one of the things that people say. So you have all these people with all these different ideas, and you can't do all of them. You're going to have to focus your time. You want to have a scheduler because that person's going to have your time be as effective as possible for the candidate. But ultimately, the campaign manager is going to be managing the time for the entire campaign and where you're going to spend money, resources largely being time of the campaign. So the campaign manager has to feel all of that, and you have to do it in a way that you don't turn half of your supporters into disgruntled, upset people who want to oppose you.
yeah,
And that's what the campaign manager has to deal with.
yeah. So if you're thinking this sounds like fun so far, we got more for you. No, the
Yeah, but you're also the one who really is, and sometimes even more so than the candidate, responsible for the victory.
absolutely. Look, this is where the execution really comes down to this, and that's why I really appreciate what Pat had to say to really jump this conversation off, because it really does come down to that. Um, in a way that there's going to be messaging and stuff, like, and that's certainly something that if you got consultants like us, we certainly help mold that and create all the structures. But, you know, as a campaign manager, you're going to need to have some structures in place to ensure that that there is a push towards victory, and what that looks like. And then, you know, being able to embrace whatever the ideas are out there, and really get them. And they're going to come from people who, you know, in a lot of campaigns, they're going to be people who are close to the candidate in some way. Could be a
Mhm.
spouse, could be a cousin, it could be whatever. Um, and the but really being able to get that, and also say, hey, you know, we really do have a plan for this. So, having a plan and a basic uh, uh, framework that you're working out of.
Yep.
Like, no kidding, this is our goals. These are our goals. This is what we're setting out to do. This is who we need to communicate to make that happen. And
Because if you don't have that, then you have basically a vacuum of I'm not sure what we're going to do next, but I don't like your idea. I mean,
yeah,
that's basically what your answer is to somebody, and that's just not going to have as much weight. Now, one of the things that you're pointing out, though, is that you are going to have to make sure that you're going in the right direction, that you have a clear vision as to where the campaign's going as far as the activities. You want to have real clarity about the activities that are going to have the greatest impact. For instance, really a campaign is 3 or 4 different activities most of the time. The candidates making phone calls and there's people raising money. That's what they're doing. There's a grassroots apparatus that's being built and communicating with voters, and there is a communications effort between your owned media, is what we would call it, where like your social media and what have you, and then earned media, talking to the press, and what else would you have? Earned, owned. I probably have another one that I would put in there, but those are the things that you're, and then paid media, of course.
yeah,
So those are the things, but the paid media is not happening until the end typically.
no,
So you're anyway. So you have all these different things that are happening most of the time, but the things that you're spending most of the time on are the honestly where you're spending most of the time in most campaigns is the fundraising in building the grassroots apparatus. That's where most of the campaign is going to be spending its time. And if you're not doing those things, if you're not raising dollars and identifying supporters, you're probably doing the wrong thing most of the time.
yeah,
And the campaign manager is going to have these conversations with people, and not have it suck up too much of your time. You can't. So what you really have to be is you have to be strong. You have to be kind, but you have to be able to keep people moving in the right direction and not get bogged down by all of this. And the best campaign managers are able to do that. The best campaign managers are not patsies. They're
mhm,
not yes men. They're not people who are just doing whatever the candidate tells them to do, because the candidate at some point is probably not going to see things too clearly. Now, I hate if you're a candidate that we're working with, we don't think that about you. We're just talking about generally candidates. But the truth is when your name's on the ballot and somebody attacks you, it becomes very personal
yeah,
and it is really hard. You want to spend all of your time on that Facebook post that somebody posted about you that is going to be seen by 30 people. You have to answer that. And maybe that's not the best use of the campaign's time.
yeah. Well, I think this is actually a great time so candidates out there, if you're watching this and you're like, okay, well, wait a minute, I know the things that need to be done. Well, we get into this a lot. So first off, knowing is one thing,
Mhm.
and maybe you know it, but sometimes, and I've had this conversation with candidates before. You know, they ask, so what does it take? And I say what it takes, and they go, well, I don't know if it takes all that. And I say, okay, and we have a conversation about it, and they leave, and they get like, yeah, you know, I get that that's what it takes. But a month or two later, sometimes I can get back to thinking, well, it's whatever I thought it took,
Mhm.
and because that never really left, um, and that's okay. But what I would encourage for candidates is to really build a rapport and trust with either your consultants or campaign manager or whoever, and really entrust in them. Like, no kidding, they've got my best interest at heart. And at some point, I am not going to be able to really take a wide view look at this,
Mm-hmm.
because something's going to happen that is going to have me tunneled in on something.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just what happens.
Yeah.
And when it does, you're going to be thankful that you have somebody who's looking at a broader picture.
You also want, so in that case for the candidate, you want to have a campaign manager, you want to have a general consultant who have the ability to separate their emotions from the situation. I have to say, when I do races that I'm more emotionally involved in, it is harder for me to think clearly. And oftentimes, if you are really, really invested and you really, really, really care, I mean, we care about all of our clients. It is important though to be able to step back, and this is one of the reasons why a candidate has somebody who it's not as personal for them, is that they can step back and they can maybe see the forest for the trees and have a clearer vision of things. And the candidates who have done really well, this is not most candidates, by the way, but there are a few candidates I can think of who actually intentionally were the ones who were actually driving at times the development of the relationship and building rapport with us. I can probably count the people on five fingers who actually did that. Most of the time, it's the consultant driving, trying to build rapport and whatnot. A lot of times, candidates can be very caught up in themselves. But the candidates who did it, it was well worth having developed that reserve, that well um, of of rapport, because I can think even in those situations, those campaigns, in every single case, the candidate was attacked relentlessly at one point, and having developed that reserve, and not just being us as campaign manager or as the consultants, we had to draw upon that reserve of rapport to be able to help the candidate get through some withering attacks on their person. I mean, really, really terrible things people have been called and things said about them, and being able to have that rapport with the candidate is really, really important in those moments. Now that goes two ways. As a candidate or as a consultant and as a campaign manager, you have that really deep rapport with somebody. You begin to take personally when people attack that person.
Yeah.
So, that's something we tend to have to train ourselves. We have to make it really clear that at times we have to separate ourselves from those emotions, and we do that. And if we don't do that, then we're not serving the client well. The campaign manager, it's hard because you can't get away from it. You're on the ground. You're in the middle of it. You have a lot of people who want to freak out around you. I was reminded of that recently. Somebody who's an amazing professional that we work with, and just how much they get up in arms, and the drama gets to them and everything else. And it really, I can't imagine being on the ground in the middle of all this stuff, and being so wrapped up in that. That's just, it takes years off of your life, I think, if you get
Well,
caught up in that.
so that is a great. So while we say that, look, as candidates, you need to be able to have campaign managers that trust them to be able to have the wider view. It's also difficult for campaign managers. So, in the campaigns that can do it, being able to have somebody who is not on the ground that you can like ping, hey, here's what we're seeing. What you know, what do you see coming out of that? Or to really be able to do that makes a huge difference, because sometimes you're going to get too engrossed in what's happening, and so that can cause blinders, not just for the candidate but you.
Yeah.
Um,
In which case, it's really helpful to have a general consultant who's not in the middle of it. When I've been, like, later in my career, when I have been a campaign manager, taken a leave of absence from the business and actually managed a campaign, in those cases, I'm also the consultant. I'm the chief strategist. And in those cases, I have had to build time into my schedule to leave the campaign office to actually maybe go to a Starbucks or something, and actually spend some time writing, and actually separate myself from the campaign so that I can get that bird's eye view, be able to see things from a higher perspective, and not get caught up in the day-to-day stuff. Um, and there's not very many times when that will be the situation that happens.
Yep.
And typically it's not going to be somebody who is both of those roles doing the race. It can be really powerful if you have that, because then as a consultant, you know a lot of the intricacies of what's going on in the race in that case. Let's go to a couple of these comments. Let's see. So that is a huge thing with campaigns trust, especially if you are like me and have run before. A lot of times we want to compare our old campaigns to our current ones. That is a really good point. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's fighting the last battle. That is having the past in your future. And we were just talking about with Tom Brady.
And if you've managed multiple races, you can fall into that same trap.
Consultants and campaign managers are just as likely. Actually, as we've seen this doing campaigns all over the country, people always tell you that's not how we do it around here, or you must not be from around here, or we just do things a little bit differently around here. And then, that always is an interesting thing to hear. People are people no matter where you go. There's a few things that might be somewhat structurally different. Like, for instance, going door to door in the backwoods of West Virginia is not something a campaign probably should spend too much time doing. And if you live in a city like suburbs, then spending campaign time going door to door makes a lot of sense. So things like that. But you can if you're a good campaign manager and you've been in lots of different places, which is something I would recommend. This is a very old-fashioned idea that I remember back when we were the podcast and we were only audio, I had Joe Fold on, who's a Democrat consultant. He's very much different politics than ours. And we had a conversation, two old guys talking about how you need to go manage a bunch of races before you start consulting, which in the last few years, that's become something that people don't do. They become consultants like after having watched one race one time, and they start doing that. But the idea is that you go and you do campaigns in multiple different states, and eventually you just kind of get a good sense for, these are the things that almost always are the same, but you still need to bring the beginner's mind to it and not have knowing be a hurdle. But then you start to see that people are people no matter where you go. And a good campaign manager is going to have that perspective and not be as likely to fall into fighting the last battle and using the last battle plan. And everybody has to fight against that. There is a bit of if you used something before and it worked, why wouldn't you want to use it again? But the thing is, you can never step into the same stream twice. That history does not repeat itself. There's no two situations that are exactly the same. So you can't really do that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think that's great. And actually, I was having this conversation with someone just this morning about this, where, we talked about, they reached out because we've worked together on campaigns before through Olson Strategies. And they said, hey, we'd like to do some of these things that we've done before. And I said, okay, well, that's great. And here are some things that have changed in, last time we worked together, which was 2 or 3 years ago, which I just want to say as an aside, we really appreciate people coming back to us and wanting to work with us again and again. And I think one of the reasons they like to do that is, I was able to say, hey, like, people don't necessarily get together in one place like they did a few years ago. That's just kind of a change that's happened. It was something that was going on anyway, and it's great when you can have it happen. But we're really in a time where people are like, yeah, I'm not going to go to a stationary location to do some of the grassroots stuff that we're talking about that volunteers would be doing. And so, hey, but we've got a whole new set of tools to make that happen. Like, okay, that sounds great. Mm-hmm. So on a campaign manager side, like, being able to be adaptive is so critical, and be able to do that. And then, like, hey, because you've done it the same way over and over and over again doesn't mean doesn't mean two things. It doesn't mean that it actually worked when you may have won a race, and it also doesn't mean that it's the thing to do in this race.
Yeah.
Um,
Also doesn't mean it's bad that you do the
that's
same
right.
thing over and over again. It might be great. Honestly, if you're doing stuff, that's probably better than not doing stuff, which is what most elected officials are doing.
That's right.
And probably one of the biggest pet peeves we have is when we end up working with an incumbent who has really not done much over the years to why we have a real problem with it is ends up a lot of times they end up in situations. Anytime you see an incumbent who gets defeated, they really have lost a connection with their electorate in most cases. At least down ballot, that's the case. In races where the media is not paying too much attention and what have you, if you're a state representative and you lose, it could be that there's a partisan shift that's happened, and things like that happen. But the truth is, if you're kind of a lazy politician who doesn't do much, and you do your typical few hundred signs you put out, well, that's not really making any difference, and it's not really creating this conversation between you and the people that you represent, which is what we as citizens want to see. As citizens, not political strategists, we would like to see our elected officials having conversations with their electorate, going door to door, talking to people on the phone, being out there in the public, and getting a sense for what matters to their constituents is something that we would like to see, and it also happens to be uh, good performance um, for a campaign. It's really good for strategy. You know what the lay of the land is, so you can come up with a plan that is going to work for your campaign. It is really important that you have that conversation. So as we come in as consultants or campaign managers working with an incumbent, we see that there's been very little that's happened. Um, it might be the few things that you do help, but oftentimes you end up being that campaign that's flat on your feet when you have a real challenge coming up at some point, and that's how incumbents get beat in many cases.
Absolutely. And so, really being on the guard for that, and that's why we'll get into kind of the actual things to do in a campaign later, but today you want to really stay on what it is that can help the campaign manager make a difference. Dustin, you want to share this? And
Sure, if you want to read it.
yeah, candidates try to lead their campaign, and they need someone to survey the field for the win. Sometimes campaign managers can see the path to the win easier than the candidate. I think this is great in a couple of ways. One of the things is really being able to, we suggest actually going out and as much as it's possible, being able to do a poll or a survey of some sort, like an actual instrument survey, to be able to see where people are. Now, we say do that based on what it is that, when we talked about the strategy sweet spot, your strengths, their weaknesses, and this being taking those to find out what the voter cares about. So when you do that, then and particularly in this point is that it is campaign managers or consultants who can really make the difference here and say, hey, these are things that are already differences here, and it's something that the voter cares about. And because the voters will tell you what they care about,
Yeah,
which is really great. Um,
so I think that's perfect. And it's going to be less personal for the campaign manager, and they're going to be more likely to weigh these things. Now, that is not to say that there aren't candidates who can actually uh, step back and take a look. I will say that there are times I have seen a campaign manager who gets more dramatic about things than the candidate.
yeah.
That is not the natural order of things, and it's probably not the way it should work. But that does happen occasionally. I've seen it maybe a few times over the years. So that is not something that you really want to have be the case, because the candidate is the candidate. It's about their life, and it's understandable that they would get caught up in it. The thing I like what is said here is candidates try to lead their campaigns and they need someone to survey the field for the win. I'd separate those, and just to make it clear, I think what's being said here is candidates often try to lead their campaigns, as in they try to manage their campaigns. That's how I read that, and that is often true. And this is something for a candidate is they're hiring staff. If you're hiring a personal assistant, we talked about this last Monday on the episode when I first started the conversation for part one, when you're trying to hire for the campaign manager. If you're the candidate and you're trying to hire an assistant, somebody who's basically going to be your gopher, then you're going to end up in a situation where the entire campaign's on your shoulders. You're going to be the one who's managing the campaign, and you're going to ultimately be giving direction to the campaign manager as opposed to the campaign manager giving you direction as to where to go. Now, that doesn't mean that the campaign manager is going to tell you what you believe and everything else. There are people out there, we have had candidates ask us to tell them what to believe, and we tell them that's not our job.
That's
to
right.
tell you what to believe. Our job is to, maybe we can help inform you, we can help you couch what you believe a certain way. But we have, that's very rare that we end up in that situation, because we don't want to work with people who we disagree with on everything, but we get that we're not going to agree with you on everything. If we really don't agree with you on most things, we're not going to take you as a client. That's just that simple. So we will have already done a good bit of vetting. So it's very rare that we end up in a situation where a candidate's telling us to tell them what to believe, but that does happen. Your job is to think about the issues, to think about what you would do in office, to have a vision, to actually be able to articulate that vision. And you can have people like us to help bring that out, and then have the message all be off of that vision. And we talk about the decision that makes 1,000 decisions. So when you have a clear vision as a candidate, the campaign manager, the communications director, the political director, everybody can start to riff off of that, like it's a jazz song that everybody knows kind of what the theme is, and then they're able to work off of that. And if you can do that, then you don't have to manage the everyday. The campaign manager is going to take your vision, and the campaign manager is then going to have the whole campaign oriented around it. We find that to actually be extremely powerful. And by having the vision, you provide the leadership that's necessary for the campaign manager then to manage the campaign.
Yeah.
So that's a thought I had from that. Here's another statement. When a candidate fights their campaign manager, they've lost the race. And I've seen this frequently in campaigns. My advice to all candidates is trust and work with their campaign manager. If this is something that's going to happen, it's going to happen in every campaign at some point. You're going to have the candidate push back. Oftentimes it's around scheduling. That's a pretty common thing that happens. Sean, what are your thoughts on this? We have seen this. It's also where the rapport is really important. It's also important for people to get that the campaign's not going to exist forever. It's only it has an expiration date.
Look, I would say I think I get the general tenor of this. I tend to agree with. And one thing that we encourage, though, like, hey, you got a yeah, but, or what if, or whatever, get it out as a candidate.
Mm-hmm.
And don't hold it back, because the other thing that can torpedo a campaign is is what I call the gosh, I'm blanking on it.
It's the fake yes.
That's right. That's right. So
the counterfeit yes is another term for it.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's a pretty common thing to happen, and that is a ticking time bomb.
Yep. And so, because the other thing that can happen is they say yes, and you say yes as a candidate when you aren't bought in. And then when the first sign of trouble comes, then you're like, see, I'm bailing on this, and I never.
Yeah, and then the daggers are out, and you blame the person and everything else. And here's the thing: it's your own damn fault. You're the one who didn't say anything. And honestly, when you get into trouble at that point, maybe it was a good strategy, maybe it was a good tactic, maybe it wasn't. It really doesn't matter. You didn't actually get on the same page. And once you do that, you pretty much guarantee whatever action it is going to be at least half-hearted at best.
So our advice for candidates is to really get that out there. For campaign managers in these instances is like, no kidding, make sure you got some what we call enrollment, but buy-in into what's being proposed here.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes, maybe it's a candidate and their spouse being bought into something.
That's a common situation is at
Yeah.
the office of the campaign headquarters. You have them all going for it, and then they go home, and the spouse just rips them a new one. Like, what, you're going to do what? And the candidate's not ready with all the arguments.
Yep.
And then they anyway, it all just kind of blows up. I've
Yep.
had that happen multiple times. And you know where it typically happens is when you're having the conversation about the contrast.
Yep.
The candidate oftentimes knows all the reasons, knows all the research, knows all the why this is the path, knows all the background that shows that it's all true, and that this is a fair contrast to make. And then you go home, and then the spouse thinks about people they might see at church, or a couple of their friends who are of the other party, who complain about their campaign already, and that's what they're thinking about, as opposed to thinking about all the clear thinking that's already gone into it. It is usually, typically, at that moment in the campaign manager is the one who's going to have to make the argument, is going to have to make it really clear if that's the right direction for the campaign, and it needs to be legitimate. These need to be a legitimate contrast, so that it that's one reason why taking the emotion out is so important. If you have a lot of emotion, you're more likely to go for blood just for the purpose of going for blood.
Yeah.
As opposed to making a clear choice.
Yeah, and so, but I do think so. I think the broader point here is, you're the campaign manager, get buy-in, and also get who the other decision makers might be, because it's not always the candidate being the decision maker. It might be, like we said, it might be a spouse. They might have a couple of people that they always go to and talk about things. Well, if you know that they might be squeamish about what it is you're talking about, well, go talk to them ahead of time. You really want to make sure that that it's very clear what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. On decisions, there are going to be decisions that the candidate doesn't need to be
correct
involved in. So this is another thing that a great campaign manager is going to be able to do. Pretty quickly, you're going to get to a place where there's a whole domain of decisions that you do not need to bother the candidate with, and you just handle that stuff. And it's going to require confidence, so being confident, and also being okay, and the candidate needs to be okay with this too. The campaign manager is going to make decisions that you're not on board with, or you wouldn't have done that way. You just have to accept that that's going to be the case. So the campaign manager can basically run the whole thing. 85% of the decisions that need to be made by the campaign manager. And then with the really core issues, basically like the one we just talked about, a big strategic direction for the campaign that's based on your vision, that's going to present a choice, those are the decisions that the candidate needs to be involved in, as far as the direction of the messaging on a really big level. So that's a really important thing, and that's going to be about being confident. It's going to take a little bit for your sea legs to get underneath you, and you don't want to, early on in the campaign, have too much of this going to the candidate on everything to get their opinion, because otherwise, I mean, why have you if they're basically doing the job? And you want to wean the candidate off of having to make decisions. So sometimes candidates will say that they want to. Sometimes candidates will say they don't want to. Sometimes they will help with all the decisions because you brought it to them. Oftentimes a candidate, if you just bring something to a candidate, they're going to deal with it because that's what seems like the thing they have to do. And you might assume that that means that they want to be a part of that decision. They actually may just not be telling you, why do I need to look at this? That's a pretty common thing we see, especially with younger campaign managers, is they're burdening the candidate with a lot of stuff the candidate doesn't really want to see or have anything to do with or have to make a decision about, but they don't want to tell the campaign manager. And this thing just keeps happening where the campaign manager brings everything to the candidate. The candidate doesn't tell them, hey, I don't want to deal with all this. And it just keeps happening. Pretty common thing. The next thing that I think the campaign manager really needs to do is to create a structure, a system, an environment within the campaign that actually pushes and pulls for over communication. The number one thing on any campaign is that people feel like there isn't enough communication. One hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing. I personally think that if you get to a place where people think there's over communication, that you're actually, and there people are going to complain. People are like, oh, we have too many conversations about this, or we have too many meetings. Usually one meeting a week people will think is going to be too much. It's not. If you have to do a 15-minute call at the beginning of every day to make sure the direction of the campaign is working, especially early on when you're trying to get out the gates, you need to do that, because even though people think that there's too much communication and all we do is talk about it, the fact of the matter is the information they get in that 15 minutes or in that hour-long meeting or even 2-hour meeting each week, they forget that they didn't know that information before that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just how things work. People will bitch about it, but the truth is, if you don't have that communication, you're not going to have a cohesive direction of the campaign. You're not going to have everybody moving in the same direction. Now, you want to make sure that all that communication is focused on what matters, and that you're not wasting people's time, that you're actually making sure people have an idea of what's happening on the campaign, and it's all geared towards action. As Pat pointed out early on, it's all about execution. What are your thoughts about those two things, about the decisions and communication?
Yeah, look, communication is key. If you're going to glean one thing out of today's conversation, it is the key to your success is going to be communicating with folks. We even talked about it when the big decisions need to be made, but also like that people get a sense of what's going on every day, so that they're not, when somebody says, well, what are you doing? Because I don't see the one thing that I think about when I think about campaigns happening, well, you can, to those folks that are supporters, you can say, oh, well, X, Y, and Z is happening. And we'd love to have you be part of our door-to-door team or whatever it is. And there are actual calls to action in that. And then, and it really comes down to having everything in place that execution can happen. And if you aren't communicating with people, it really can't happen.
Yeah.
And
it's why that is a form of action. Communication is actually a form of action. We like to say things like all talk, no action. Truth is, talking can be action. Not all talk is action. Some talk is
talk,
or it's action in the wrong direction. That's also possible. Well, we're going to begin to wrap here, but a couple last comments is that having your family be a part of the joy of your campaign. It's important to see where your family wants to be. This is really good. Sometimes the spouse is there to be moral support. Sometimes the spouse wants to be more involved. Sometimes the spouse really needs to be involved in just a couple of the big decisions to be informed about it. And that's it. It's like 2 or 3 big decisions in the campaign. And then they spend the time keeping the home fires burning.
Yep.
Something we've mentioned a couple of times, I think, in other episodes. If you're a single candidate running, there's nothing wrong with that, but there's going to be a structure that you're going to need to have in place. I remember one time a candidate for governor having a conversation with this person and could not hear them speaking whatsoever because of the wind. So much wind in the phone, and came to find out that the candidate was on top of their roof cleaning out the gutters because there was nobody else at home to deal with cleaning out the gutters, and that was what was dictating our schedule. So having structures in place that allow you, grocery shopping was something that had to be handled um, through the campaign, or we had to schedule time for it. It became a real thing we had to deal with. It's not There's nothing wrong with it. You just have to deal with it. So the spouse, oftentimes the number one job is to just keep things going at home, and that is a really important thing.
Yep.
And the kids might want to be really involved. Maybe they don't want to be that involved. It can be a great opportunity. George W. Bush was involved in his dad's first campaign very heavily, um, probably to good effect. They say that it was mostly to keep an eye on Lee Atwater to make sure he wasn't as effective as he could be. At least that would be the Lee Atwater perspective. But George W. Bush was there to keep an eye on him. Um, Anyhow, so last comment: as a person who has worked on a campaign, you work your heart out for little or no pay through the trial of the campaign. Frequently, everyone becomes family. That is really true. When you're on a campaign, the people that you work with in the train, that's a really cool thing to be able to have. And you've worked with so many people over time. I think the first time I worked with you was in 2007,
Yep.
in a tough situation, a special election that could have easily gone sideways, and we pulled it off. So there's these people throughout your life. If you work on lots of campaigns, it's one of the blessings of working on campaigns. All the people you end up being a part of it. It's a family. Yep, everyone's saying family. That's great. And the two people who said that are people we know from previous campaigns.
Absolutely.
So
Yep. Having worked together before, and look, the it is critical too that building some of that camaraderie
mhm.
um, is critical in the campaign structure. Um, and not just if they're family members, but also that there's a real connection, because you're going to be spending, in some of these cases, you're going to be spending long hours with them. Um, in races for Congress, and and those in particular. I mean, those are all full time jobs, and it really takes something in these competitive races. So, and in the campaigns where in these competitive state legislative races and whatnot, where you might be the only paid staffer if you're a campaign manager, it is so critical that you get these people to have the volunteers and everybody else have buy-in. It gets back to that empowerment
Mm-hmm.
idea there, because you are asking people to volunteer their time. And we talk about, months ago we talked about the 3 T's: time, talent, and treasure. Your job basically is to assess those and to execute where those best fit, and to make sure that you have enough of each. And so, to boil it down.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. Well, we've had a good conversation on this. Last week on Monday, we had a conversation about a lot of input. This is a fun topic. We've done a lot of campaigns ourselves, and I think as a general consultant now, it's really the managing so many campaigns from so many different states. I will say that, of course, once I met my now wife, she told me I could no longer be a vagabond just traveling the country, being able to fit all my belongings into the trunk of my car. I got to the point where I could have everything I owned in the trunk of my car, plus one side of the back seats of the car. So I could have actually 4 people in the car with me with all of my belongings, and I knew exactly, like Tetris, I could just fit it all in there. And I got to work in so many amazing places. I tell people oftentimes that my campaign management was basically decided not by the candidates, though they were an important part of it, but by the local food cuisine. I was in the Northeast, and we get great lobster rolls and things like that. And then I went to every part of the region of the country that has their own barbecue. So I've been to every single barbecue region of the country, and that's a really cool thing. So you get to go to all different places and learn about all sorts of different cultures. And one of the things that from that is it's oftentimes I meet somebody in Washington, D.C., you meet a lot of people who are from all over the place. And I've actually been to maybe even their hometown, even if it's only like 10,000 people. I've actually been there before. And it's really a lot of fun to be able to have that. So if someone's thinking about being a campaign manager and going and managing races around the country, it is really fulfilling. It's something you probably want to do in your late 20s. and maybe not do it so much in your 30s and on. But that is a really, it really is a blessing to be able to see our country and get to know it at a level that, honestly, if you've never been to a district before or a state, and you go in as a campaign manager for a race, you will know that state or that district better than 99% of the people in that state or district within probably a month of being on the ground, because you're getting to know it at such a deep level. You're going all over the place. You're getting to know all the movers and shakers. It is really a cool thing to be able to do that and to get to know so many people. And just from all the wonderful people who have made comments today, you get to know a lot of really cool people as
Yeah.
you go around the country.
Well, absolutely. That is so true. And um, so yeah, so if you're thinking about being a campaign manager, really look at this as an opportunity to grow, and these are the types of leadership you get to exhibit. And if you think that's for you, reach out to us. We'd love to have a conversation with you about it. Um, and and then and then and we'd be glad to empower you. And then it also just depends on whatever else might be going on there. But yeah, and put you in touch with the right people if that's something that would make sense for you. So and continue that conversation further. Well, Dustin, how can people get connected with us and make sure that they're not missing anything on the campaign, or any of our episodes or any of our content we're doing right now?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. The last question I want to make sure that's really clear. So Olson Strategies no longer manages campaigns. Not in the case of not often. Let's say if you wanted to have a campaign manager for, let's say, a U.S. Senate campaign, we would be most likely to be the consultant who supports the campaign manager. We would be thinking about the strategic direction, helping create the message with the candidate and the campaign manager, and helping build out the team. We'd be consulting in that case. It's occasionally that one of us might take a leave of absence and manage a campaign. That's a possibility sometimes. And then some campaigns, let's say it's an issue campaign, it may not be the same kind of a day-to-day campaign management that's needed. So,
and we also train and develop campaign managers, and sometimes they'll work for us on a specific campaign depending on what it is as well.
And we're looking for people. If you are one of those folks who would love to go around the country, we are looking for people who would manage campaigns for Olson Strategies. We've had a number of people who have done that over the years, and they've gone on to do a lot of really cool things. And you get to be a part of a system that really supports you as a campaign manager. And you get to have as mentors people like Sean and myself who've managed a lot of campaigns and know what you're going through and can help you through that process. So if you're someone who's interested in managing campaigns, in traveling the country, getting to see the country, and being able to be a part of really awesome efforts, we are always looking for folks. And if you just want to talk to somebody about what it takes to be a good campaign manager, we always enjoy doing that. I would say one of the things I love about my profession is that I have helped so many people. Well, so many people have had their first job working for me, and seeing them now doing all sorts of cool things across the country is really fulfilling for me to see that and to know that I had some impact in that. And of course, they've taken whatever I was able to give them and make it their own and add something to it and do their own thing. And that's really cool to see. And that's what we want to do here. If you want to be a part of the Political Trade Secrets Insiders, we are really about providing what we have here and giving it to folks, everyday citizens across the country, to be able to take and run with it, to empower you as political leaders to reignite American patriotism. That anything that we can provide here, that is a seed that's planted all across the country that can grow into something that's really special. So sign up to be a Political Trade Secrets Insider at politicaltradesecrets.com. Get exclusive stuff. Also make sure that we can always be in communication. Today was fun. Sean did a great job of just talking. You can tell stream of consciousness and you're the only one able to speak, that does take something, and you did a great job with that, rolling with the punches, because it couldn't communicate because the whole thing shut down, and I had to basically restart everything to make it work. So that's always fun, and that's the case where having ice in your veins is perfect a perfect moment for that. Everything seems to not be working, and you just have to take it as it comes. So anyway, everything that we can provide to support you as a political leader across this country, we're here to do that, because we're here to reignite American patriotism. With that, Sean, tell people how they can work with us and our sponsors.
Absolutely. Look, you want to know how you can best be a political leader in your neck of the woods. You thinking about running for office yourself, or as Dustin mentioned, being able to communicate with us on how best to be the best campaign manager you can be. Reach out to us at olsonstrategies.com. It's OLSON strategies.com. You can email me, Sean, which is SEAN at olsonstrategies.com, or Dustin at olsonstrategies.com to get connected with us there. We're also proud to be sponsored by Grassfire. What do they do? It's canvassing, petitioning, live calling. So it's on the doorstep, in front of the grocery store, or over the phone. Grassfire really delivers your message, or gets you or your issue onto the ballot with the professionalism it takes to really best represent you. You only get one chance to make a first impression. Have it be Grassfire. www.grassfire.us. They also fuel 10centtexting.com. What do they do? It's the communication with people on their mobile device. Image, GIF, short video, right there in the body of the text message. More characters in the text message than I think anyone in the business that I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
At a great price. It's 10centtexting.com. Reach out to them. They literally wrote the book on texting, and so you can download that. That's their free gift to you to be able to communicate on how best to communicate with your voters, your constituents. It's 10centtexting.com. Dustin.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for that. And I really appreciate everybody who's out there sharing the episodes, making sure that we get all the great information out to as many people as possible. As you may have noticed, Facebook has made it so it's really difficult to share to other political groups right now. So your help sharing this across the internet is really important. So we are looking to recruit new people to be a part of the Share Force. So go to politicaltradesecrets.com and sign up there, and let us know if you want to be part of the Share Force. A number of you have been a really great part of that, and I hear all of the requests because you all want to see the Share Force video.
Yeah. Absolutely. That is, look, and it makes such a difference to really be able to get out our message. And for us, it's really about reigniting American patriotism, being able to share that message, and some of the great ways that you can do it. And that's what this show was all about today.
Yeah. So go and join ShareForce. Let us know if you'd like to be a part of the ShareForce. And thank you to everybody who is. We're going to be having some resources for folks and exclusive training just for people on the ShareForce. Looking for people who can maybe be our captain of MeWe, our captain of Parler when it comes back. And maybe it came back today. It's supposed to come back today. And in all the different places. And we're still out there. We're still out there trying to take that hill when it comes to Facebook and Twitter. We will be there. We're going to be there making sure that people can get off the island. We're going to be saving people from the Facebook island as long as we can. We're going to be there, bringing people over to Political Trade Secrets so that they know they have a home if they really do care about this country, that we keep reaching out to folks and getting them, is because at some point I assume at some point we're just all going to be completely shut off in those different places. So we're going to keep getting people onto the boat and rescue them as fast as we can as we go along here. So thank you very much for being a part of the show. Thank you, Sean, for rolling with the punches. And it's actually been a really fun conversation. We're gonna have another conversation tomorrow. I might be special guest, or we might be doing that later. I'm not quite sure. And thank you for the rocket. That's we heard the request. We wanted to make sure that we provided the ShareForce icon there. So do join ShareForce, do make a difference, and do reignite American patriotism. But thank you all very much for a great episode, and we will see you again tomorrow at roughly 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you very much.
Join us next time by subscribing on iTunes, and get show notes and sign up for our newsletter at politicaltradesecrets.com.